Have you ever heard the phrase, showing up is half the battle? Well, in the case of the Mustang, showing up is 100% of the battle. And that's because there are no V8 muscle cars left. The Camaro is no more. The Challenger is this weird EV thing. So the question is, did Ford do the bare minimum just by showing up, or did they actually make a good car? That's what we're going to find out today by taking a look outside, inside, and most importantly, we're going to take it on the road to see what it's like to drive. Comment below with what you think about the looks of the brand new Mustang. Now, to my eyes, it's rather interesting. As a previous generation S550 owner, it's not a massive departure, and ultimately that's because it's pretty much the same car underneath. Now, they have done a bunch to modernize it, specifically in the interior, but also you have a completely new front end. Along with the rear end, the taillights are definitely more modern, but still harken back to the Mustangs of old with those 3 individual lights. It's also worth noting that we're seeing this here with a whole ton of packages assigned to it. It has the GT Performance package, which is getting you things like these bigger wheels and tires. It has the Night Pony package, a bit of a weird name, but that ultimately blacks out a lot of things like the side mirrors and the roof. It's just a very well optioned Mustang GT, but that does equate to a $60,000 Mustang GT. We'll get a little more into the value later, but the last thing to say about the looks here is this vapor blue metallic color, which I think with the black accents looks quite good. This, of course, is the beating heart of the Mustang GT and ultimately why people buy this car. This is their 5-liter V8, now in their 4th generation, now has dual throttle bodies, which actually looks really cool and also makes a lot of power. 480 horsepower-ish, 486 if you get the active exhaust, wow, 6 more horsepower, and around 418 pound-feet of torque. This engine sounds fantastic. It's paired beautifully with a 6-speed manual transmission. This is just a dying breed of car, and once again, that's why you want to buy this. The interior is where Ford put a lot of resources to update, specifically with technology. And I want to be very clear, this isn't a more refined interior than the last generation. It feels about the same quality-wise, but it has more technology. And frankly, I'm just going to put my old man hat on for a little bit because I tend to be an old soul and say it's not exactly better for it, but they are trying to attract a different demographic. So like Chevy did with the Corvette, they designed that car around attracting younger buyers because their old demographic is frankly aging out. And that's really what Ford has done here. That's why you have this massive screen that spans the gauge cluster all the way to the center console infotainment. It has all kinds of customizability, which I don't mind. You know, being able to create a mode for your custom suspension settings, steering settings, active exhaust settings, that's all cool. But in terms of being able to, customize the gauge cluster in 20,000 different ways, have this Unreal Engine, spin your Mustang around virtually in here, it's just, I don't know. How many times are you actually going to do that? You'll buy the car, you'll mess with it for probably an hour, and then you'll never touch it again. So it just seems to me like a bit of waste of resources. But once again, they're trying to attract younger buyers, and maybe I'm just not the one for that. Now, functionally, it feels outside of the infotainment extremely similar to the last generation. Just size, space, the visibility in this vehicle. The infotainment is the big problem that I have because you no longer have any physical buttons for things like your HVAC. It's all menu structure based. It's also not super fast to respond. So for a brand new system, which I would hope would have good processing power, it's slow to boot up. It's just kind of slow to respond. And that's really the last thing that you want in a screen. Keep in mind that this car has the Fastback Premium package, so it gets things like the leather seats, which are frankly couch cushions, a little bit supportive but extremely wide, will have to fit larger Americans, of course, and it has heated and cooled seats. Whether or not you need that stuff, along with the B&O audio system, which is frankly mediocre, if you need that stuff, you step up to the premium package. If not, you can save a lot of money by buying the base fastback. Now, let's do the most important thing, go for a drive.
There is no bike test this week. Leave a comment below if you miss it. Otherwise, please take these lovely V8 noises as my apology.
Out for a drive in the Mustang GT. There's a couple things that are surprising about this car, and there's a couple things that are expected. Now, the expected things, of course, are the engine, or is the engine, I should say. This V8, absolute masterpiece of a 5-liter in 2024. The fact that this thing even exists is incredible. But you expect that, and we'll get more into this engine. What's surprising is the suspension. That's really where my mind has gone to first with this vehicle, is how good these MR dampers are. This is like a $1,500 option on this car. Like, best money spent in terms of packaging by far. MR dampers have this incredible ability to change electronically the damping on the fly. So they can actually have like a really big range of adjustment. So there's a lot of cars that have adaptive dampers, but in terms of having MR dampers, not too many have them. And specifically when you think about something like a muscle car like this, where it's kind of a GT car a little bit, and it's also kind of a sports car, it's like the perfect use case for MR dampers, because you can have this sort of like wide breadth of very comfortable. Around town, these dampers do not beat you up whatsoever. They're very comfortable, even by, like regular car standards. Of course, by sports car standards, these are very comfortable, but even by regular car standards, this is very, very nice. So definitely, if you're gonna get this car, get the MR dampers. And that's what's so nice, that they're putting these dampers on the lower tier models. So I used to have a couple of S550 Mustangs. I had a GT350, which is an incredible car, and that was in early days of Ford with the MR dampers. Incredible. And then I had a regular S550, which was ultimately modified, but those cars came with just sort of standard passive dampers. And the suspension is really what takes this car to the next level. Now, you're of course paying for it, and we'll get more into value later, but the way this car rides, how flat it is in the corners, the adjustability, the neutralness of the handling, that's where Mustangs have really come a long way. Still probably not as good as some of the Camaros that I've driven. I got automatic rev matching off, something that you can have on, which is really nice for around town. It will blip the throttle for you when you shift, so you don't have to. But when you're on a canyon road and you're in a manual, you want to do it yourself. So the neutralness is fantastic. What is not so fantastic in terms of sort of handling and suspension is this steering. It is completely numb, which is a surprise. It's super quick to turn in. It's very direct. I like how it's not overly heavy, like heavy for no reason, but it has absolutely no feel. I have no idea on earth what is going on with these front tires, and that is a bit of a shame. That said, while the steering is incredibly numb, this car is so capable. There's so much mechanical grip in this car. I mean, they're sort of following the Chevy mindset, which Chevy was a very early adopter of the muscle cars, to be like, hey, what if we just cram the biggest tires that we possibly can under these cars? We'll have fast laps. Go figure. More tires, more grip. And Ford is kind of finally following that model. There's just so much mechanical grip here. So, you know, the suspension is the highlight for me with this car. There is still a lot of road noise with these things. I mean, it's not that refined of an experience. The fact that you have pretty grippy tires certainly adds to that. Well, let's talk brakes. Oh, how can I forget about these brakes? Oh my goodness. I don't know if they're mechanically, God, identical to the GT350. They look identical to the brakes that I had on my GT350, which are just phenomenal. I mean, Ford is really prioritizing handling and braking, not just all engine like they used to be. So these brakes are fantastic. They never fade. They have so much stopping power for as big as this vehicle is. I mean, this is a driver's car, and that's not something that we could say about older Mustangs. Now, you do kind of have to get this GT performance pack. You do have to get the MR dampers. You do have to spend a lot of money, but there's not a lot of cars that can compete with this even at $50,000. That's what's so crazy about it. We've saved one of the best for last, which is of course this engine. The only manufacturer that's really making something like this anymore in terms of muscle car with a V8, this is it. Is it as good as the Voodoo engine? I'm a little biased because I used to have a GT350. No, it doesn't quite have that rawness, that race character, that super, super high RPM redline. But in terms of American V8s, being that this is dual overhead cam, it does have a racy sound to it. I really like these dual throttle bodies. It makes good power. Now, it's very linear power, so it doesn't feel super, super fast. You know, so many of these new cars with the turbochargers and everything, they hit you with so much torque and it kind of changes your reality on speed. This is super linear. The other thing you have to keep in mind is we're at 7,000 feet. It's not slow. It doesn't feel like that close to 500 horsepower that they claim, but if you equate the 3% per 1,000 feet, which people say for NA engines, you lose about 3% of power per 1,000 feet. So, you know, 7,000 feet, that's 21% of power loss. So this thing would feel like an absolute monster at sea level. It's something to keep in mind. Most people don't have to deal with elevation. Most people don't live at elevation.
It's worth noting, as I just finished that really long second gear pull, the gearing in this car is insanely tall. I can do 73 miles an hour in second gear. This car has the shortest rear end you can buy new at a 373, although I think it would be better enjoyed with a 410.
It's time to sum up the Mustang, and really it boils down to two different questions. Number one, if you are a previous generation owner, like an S550 owner, should you upgrade to this one? And I'll just start out by saying, if I still had mine, I would not be itching to trade it in or sell it to get this one. This is incrementally better. You know, you have a slightly better engine, you know, it's slightly retuned, it has that dual throttle bodies, a little more horsepower. The interior is the part that's heavily revised, but for me, that's just not something that I prioritize in a sports car. But that's up to you. Is it your daily driver? Do you really like tech in your sports car? Then maybe it does make sense. So in terms of should you upgrade from an old one, it's pretty similar. Probably not, especially given the price. This is right around $60,000. And when I was trying to build mine online, one of the interesting catches is I would really want MagneRide, as I've talked about before. You have to get at least the Fastback Premium GT in order to qualify for MagneRide. So basically, all said and done, you can't get MagneRide under $56,000, $58,000. And at that point, you might as well get a dark horse because you're knocking on the door of dark horse. Now, the question is, if you don't already have a Mustang, should you buy this, just coming from any other car? It is a fantastic car. Like, this NA V8 is the last of its kind, so if you want that kind of thing, get it before it's gone. If you're coming or comparing this to something like a Nissan Z or a Toyota Supra, I would definitely get this over a Nissan Z. The Supra is a tougher question. For me, at altitude here, about 6,000 feet, the turbocharged engines in those Supras just lose a lot less horsepower, so you get a true more sense of that speed with the Supra as you compared to this car. It is still by no means slow here, but it doesn't have all that horsepower that it would at sea level. So for me here in Colorado, I also like smaller cars. I might be more tempted to go with the Supra, but either way, you can't go wrong with either of these, and I could totally see why you would choose this over the Supra just if you want V8 noises. I hope you guys found this video enjoyable. If you made it this far in the video, I appreciate it very much. Consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.